Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Dark House, the show dedicated to teach you how to do the best visual effects of modern films with low budgets. And today, we do a meteor shower, like this. This tutorial we will need Trapcode Particular. If you don't have Trapcode Particular, go to the link in the description and download the package which includes all the elements that you will need for this tutorial. With that being said, from now on all the tutorials are going to include a download link with the images or footage that I use for the tutorials. So let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to start making a new composition. Should be around 5 to 10 seconds depending on your should be around 7 seconds or so. So next thing is we're going to create a new solid. We're going to name it particles and we're going to add Trapcode Particular. Now we're going to start changing the settings. Set your particles to 500. Set your emitter type to a light. Okay. Now let's bring one of our Meteor images and scale it down to wherever you guys scale it down to your preference. Now let's create a new null object. And also we're going to create a new light. We're going to make it a point light and we're going to name it emitter. Now we're gonna pick whip. Now we're gonna parent our emitter to our null. We're gonna switch to a two view. That way we can get our top view. And we're gonna position our light right where our emitter is. Then we're also gonna center it. We're gonna center our emitter on our image as well. We're gonna position our emitter slightly to the left side of our image as well. Then we're going to parent our emitter. Then we're going to parent our Meteor image to our null object as well. Then we're going to position our null all the way to the left, and by parenting these two, they will both follow our null object and we will be able to control both of them just with the null. Then we're gonna set a few keyframes. That way our null moves from the left side of our screen to the right side. Change your emitter type to light. Change your velocity to 7. Velocity random 0. Velocity distribution 0. Velocity from motion also 0. And your emitter size, you can set that to 0 or 1, your preference. You can set them to 1. So now we're gonna get a movement like this across the screen. Now we're gonna go to our particle menu. We're gonna bring our cloud element, shut it off as we don't need to see it. In our particle, let's set it up to about 500. We're on the particle life, let's set it to 5. Now here I'm changing the composition timing. I originally made it 15 seconds. I don't need it that long. I'm just gonna make it 7 seconds. Now go back to your particles menu. Set your life to 5. Now, on the particle type, we're going to change it to sprite colorize. Go to your texture, and we're going to change that layer to the cloud element. Now go to your size. Now go to your rotation and orientation to motions. Turn it on. your size, let's change that to around 50. Your opacity random 100. Now the color over life, we're gonna set it to over life. You can go to the preset menu and change the gradient from white to black. Now we're gonna change our white color to a yellow. We can do that by double clicking on the color. So now we have this color. However, we want our black to start kicking in, our particles to start changing from yellow to black slightly sooner, like so. Now on the opacity over life, you can choose one of these presets and then you can adjust it. In my case, I started just adjusting it slightly. And then you can just click the smooth option. Now let's go to our physics. On the air, let's set our gravity to -3. Now our size random, we can also bump it up to around 50 or 100. We could also bump it up to a 100. At this point, now let's change our life random to 50 as well. And we go to our physics in our air menu, and we're going to change our spin frequency. We're going to change our spin amplitude to 25 and our fade in spin to 50. Now let's change our particles to 1000 per second so we can get a different look. And our velocity random, let's bump that up to about 25. Let's bump that up to 100. And we're going to change our velocity to around 20. Now we're going to go to the color over life one more time, and we're going to add 2 more knobs. And you can do this by simply clicking on the color ramp, and it will add a knob. It will add the knob the same color as you're clicking. In this case, I clicked the black, so it added a new black. And we're gonna change it to we're gonna change it from yellow to black, again to yellow, and then again to black. So we have something that looks like it's burning, and then it's transforming into smoke. And again, our velocity to 25. That way we get this look. Alright, so now let's start working on our background plate. I'm gonna go to my last frame, and I'm just gonna track this. So I'm gonna go to my tracker, set track motion, and then I'm gonna position it where I think it should be tracking. Now I like to track my footage almost twice. That way well, in this case, for example, I started in the last frame, then I tracked it backwards, and you'll see that in my first frame my tracker moved its position, so it found a better position option. So now I'm going to track it forward, and now if I go to my last frame and if I zoom in, I can see that the actual tracker worked better in that position. So as you can see, I tracked it twice. So next thing, I'm gonna create a new null, and I'm just gonna rename this P, which stands for position, I guess. Edit target, P, apply, and X and Y. Alright, so if you don't have a very powerful computer, if you could just, well, in this case, we're just going to bring in our element that we just created. which is the pre-comp. And we're gonna rotate it. We're gonna go to our last frame and then just position it where we think it looks good. Then we parent this element to our null object, and it will stick. And now we see that it follows our null. However, if you don't have a very powerful computer, just use to practice with this tutorial, just use the elements that I'm providing, and for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm gonna use those elements. However, the first time I created this effect, I created about 5 different elements. If you do have Trapcode particular, I would recommend creating about 5 different elements and rendering them out. That way your computer doesn't have to render thousands of particles at once. So as you can see, I'm just changing the pre-composition for one of the elements which have previously been rendered. It doesn't look the same. I personally like more the one we just created. So if you're gonna create another element, if you're just gonna adjust it, if you have particular and you're just gonna adjust them, changes the settings a little bit, that way you get different looks. Now in this case, I'm just duplicating that element. Since I'm not controlling it with particular anymore, I'm duplicating that element, and I'm just changing the timing on my composition, and also I'm adjusting my element sizing. That way they all look different. Again, if you do have Trapcode particular, I recommend running anywhere from 5 to 10 different elements. Why? Because here we have a still image, and you can almost see that they almost look the same, and these 3 elements already pretty much look the same. Now this 4th element that I'm providing does look different. It's much larger and basically this is to give it a look as it's in a further distance. So it will definitely also bring your opacity down on this element, as it will blend in more with the background to give it more depth. And at this point, I'm just going to start duplicating that element and then adjusting the sizing, rotation, so it looks different. Also, if you don't have particular and you're just using the elements I'm providing, I recommend changing the timing not only in the composition, but also on the layer itself. And you can do that by right-clicking and just stretching the time. It doesn't really matter. It's really up to you. And another thing I'm doing here is I'm creating a mask around one of these elements, and I'm feathering the mask out. That way it looks like it's coming from behind the clouds, and that generates an illusion of more depth on that element. So duplicate, and position. So we're just going to duplicate a bunch of different elements and start positioning them. And this is in the last frame. Why? Because basically our last frame is the one that is where you see all these elements coming together. So that's why we're doing it in the last frame. So once we're happy with all the elements that we already imported, I'm gonna go look for a lens blur, and then I'm just gonna start adding it to my elements so they can blend in. That way they're not that sharp in my image. And you can add it anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe 10, depending on your taste. And then I'm just gonna duplicate that effect, and I'm gonna paste it in all these elements. Now this is where I would encourage you guys to start experimenting with the effects and the composition as well, by changing the amount of blur and changing the sizing. This is your final frame, is where you're going to decide the look, I guess, your final look of your comp. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and pre-compose all those elements with the null object. That way I'm gonna apply a curves effect, and I can manipulate the look of all those elements with one single effect. And since this effect is gonna be the same, it's not like the blur had to be different on each one of these elements. It will control all of them. So we're just gonna add a curves and bring our shadows down, and then we're gonna add a glow and increase your glow threshold to around 80-85, and also your glow intensity. So since these meteors are supposed to be burning as they're falling from the sky, it's only natural that you will see some sort of blurriness and some glow, especially when our subject is in focus. If our subject is in focus, then we should have some depth field on these elements. Now I'm gonna Control D to duplicate my background plate, and I'm gonna add a tint effect. I'm gonna make it slightly darker, not that dark. Now I wanna basically just mask around the area where the meteors are and feather out my mask around 100 to 200 pixels. And I just want to create some sort of smoke. Obviously, if there's a lot of meteors and you have a lot of burning stuff on your sky, there should be some sort of smoke, of course. So we're going to create that illusion, and we're going to set a few keyframes for our mask on our last frame, and then just start animating to follow the comp. So as our camera is moving, the mask animates. Now I create a new adjustment layer, and I'm gonna add a heat distortion. Again, if there's burning elements, you might want to add some heat. Now if you have the heat distortion, this you can set the default settings. I personally don't like it and I want to play with them. So I'm gonna bring my heat amount to 0, and I'm just gonna copy the same mask that I originally created for that smoke looking layer, and I'm gonna paste that mask on my adjustment layer. And then also I'm gonna animate my mask opacity from 0 to 100. Bring your heat amount to 0, and now you can see we have a very minimum look and very minimum change, but it's a change. Now I'm gonna create a new adjustment layer. I'm gonna add a new curves, which will affect my whole comp. And basically here we're just starting to color correct our composition, and then I go to different frames so I can start getting better looks. I can no longer work with one frame. Also on your heat distortion, bring the distortion amount to 5. Let's minimize that. Now I'm gonna create a new solid. I'm gonna make it yellow. Now this is just color correction, so this should be your preference. In my case, I'm going for a very sci-fi-ish look. So I set up a yellow, brought my opacity up to 20%. Now I'm gonna go for a glow, and I'm gonna look for a diffuse glow. And I'm gonna apply this diffuse glow to my top adjustment layer, which will affect my whole comp again. I'm gonna bring my glow radius slightly high and my threshold to about 30. Now I'm gonna add a CC lens again to that same adjustment layer, and this is basically just to kind of merge all of the composition together and make it seem like it was all recorded with the same camera. So the size, I move it around to change my size to around 450. And then here is just basically adjustment. Nothing is final, guys. There's no final thing. I've said this in my previous tutorials, and I hope you guys are doing it. That's why I want to provide all the elements from now on, so you guys can start playing with the looks. These steps that you guys see here or not the final steps. These are just the steps that I took. In this case, I'm going to create a vignette. You see in my previous tutorials, I most of the time do vignettes. So on this vignette, I just created a circle, created a vignette, set my mask to subtract, feather out 250 pixels, and brought my opacity to 25. So again, there's no final look, guys. So play around with all the settings, play around with all the looks, play around with all the effects. That's the only way to achieve something that looks appealing to you. In the end, if you're not working for a company that is, if this is your own project, you might want to just experiment with everything. And also finding your own style, I would say. For example, me, I always try to add vignettes, and I always try to go for a sci-fi-ish look. I don't know if that's just my thing, but I really like it. In this case, I added a lens flare, all again, to sell out my shot. So, if you have Video Copilot, optical flares. In this case, I didn't want to create a new flare from scratch, so I just went ahead and I added I chose one from the presets, and then I adjusted it to my look, or something that I thought looked okay. Now, this is something that I want to point out to you guys. Again, if you don't have a very powerful computer, create one Meteor, render it out, and then create another Meteor, render it out. So try to do around 5 to 10 Meteors. That way you have different looks, different elements, and your computer's not rendering thousands of particles, which it will crash eventually. So here I'm playing with my optical flare. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna position my flare somewhere where it doesn't take too much attention from the meteors. It's somewhere where it just blends in. Then I'm gonna scale this layer, and I'm gonna reposition it. Again, this is in my last frame. And I'm just trying to find here somewhere where I think it looks good. But if you see, then I'm gonna parent this. There's no position anymore because I already pre-compose it. So what I do is I go to that pre-composition, Control C to copy that null object, Control V to paste it, and I have that tracking info back in my comp. So basically, after all that, we get something like this. Now don't forget to add motion blur to all your elements. Alright guys, so that's it for today's tutorial. I hope you guys liked it and maybe learned something from it. If you did, post it in the comments below and give it a thumbs up. Also, if you guys like any of the songs played in the background of the tutorial, feel free to download them. There's links on the description of the video. They're royalty free. They're created by the artists at Dark House, including myself. So go ahead and apply them in any of your productions. Also, if you guys have any suggestions whatsoever for any future videos or any future effects, let me know and I'll try to recreate them and show you how to do them. As always, I'm Sean Garris. Thank you for stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time.